Dali. Yan. Maligayang araw sa inyong lahat. Medyo naging busy ako kasi yung aming chairman of the board namatay eh. Dali yun yung aking monitor eh. Sandali lang, nag-aayos pa. Ay nako. Pagka Pasko, sobrang daming, pagka Christmas season, sobrang daming trabaho. At the same time, ay saktong panahon ng mga examen natin, ano? Dali lang, tapos namatay pa yung isang kamag-anak ko. Naloko na. Okay, now naka-monitor na ako. Okay. 5 lang kayo. Ba't ganun? Maligayang araw po, Mr. Locsin, Miss Jimenez, Miss Cueva, Miss Blas. Tayo lang. Bahala na sila. Ano bang araw ngayon? Wednesday. Tama naman ako, ano? Hindi katulad dati, nagkamali. Ganito, habang naghihintay tayo, tingnan natin yung ating Mentimeter, ha? Dali lang, Mentimeter. Ba't ba ako nag-off nito? Nakalagin na nga ako kanina eh. Sandali ha. Nakalagin na nga ako eh. Screen share tayo. Just a moment. Nawala yung screen sharing. Okay. Screen share tayo. Anong mga sagot ninyo ha? Tingnan natin. You remember the questions? Ito. Okay, let's see. Ba't nawala? Ito. Okay, tingnan natin. UP students generally appreciate Turing's test. Parang malabo, ano? Hindi napapag-usapan eh. Kaya, pag may nanliligaw sa inyo, halimbawa, Miss Blas, pag may nanligaw siya, tanongin mo, alam mo ba yung Turing's test? Pag hindi alam, huwag mo nang sagutin. UP students in general know what contradictions the traditional concept of mind brings with it. Diba? Bakit natin tinanong? Excuse me. Kasi natatandaan ninyo, sabi natin, with your terms, your words, you establish a conceptual framework. Now, with a conceptual framework, you establish a theoretical framework. Now, it may happen that the words that you establish actually are self-contradictory. Pag minsan, may mga words na ganun eh. Self-contradicting. Hulaan nyo kung anong tawag sa self-contradicting words. May tawag dyan eh. So, bahala kayo sa buhay nyo, hanapin nyo. But your words and therefore your concepts may actually bring contradictions. Yan. And apparently, ang mga UP students, hindi naman lahat alam yan eh. Okay? Now, more importantly, ano yung contradictions that our concept of mind brings with it? Yun ang tanong. There is no alternative to interpreting near-death experience except to assume that humans are capable of out-of-body experience. Out-of-body experience, ha? Niniwala kayo dyan, ha? Humans have souls. Sigurado kayo, ha? Yan. Okay. Balik tayo dito. Balik tayo dito, ha? Sigurado kayo, may souls kayo, ha? Ay, by the way, sandali. Bakit ako sandali lang, ha? Just a moment. Habang naka-screen share ako, ay, sorry. May mali. Naka-virtual background ako eh. Tingnan nyo. Virtual background eh. Hindi ako dapat naka-virtual background eh. Kasi pareho lang yung virtual background ko at saka yan eh. Sandali lang, we have to edit kasi ayaw natin ng virtual background, eh. We don't want virtual backgrounds kasi they consume so much of our data. Okay, yan, wala na. Ganito, anong ating topic ngayon? Review lang tayo ng Turing's test, that's one, and then we go into philosophy of mind. Ano nga yung Turing's test? Ito, Turing's test, originally called imitation game by Alan Turing in 1950. Imagine nyo, 1950 pa. A test of a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to or indistinguishable from, that's the point, indistinguishable from that of a human. Galing yan sa Wikipedia. Okay, Wikipedia yan, Okay. Ngayon, paano ba ginagawa yung Turing's test? Kung natatandaan nyo. Sabi natin, what do you do if you are involved with Turing's test? You get a room, one room, say, tawagin natin room letter A. You get another room. And let's call that room letter B. And you put a human in one of it. And you put a computer in the other room. So you put a computer in the other room, you put the person in one room, but you do not know where the person is or where the computer is. So that's the question. Okay? Sino nandito sa room A? Yung human ba? O yung machine? So ulitin natin, sino yung nandito? Yung human ba? O yung machine? Yun ang tanong. Sino nandito? Yung human ba o yung machine? Now, before you make the decision, sabi ni Alan Turing, we'll give you the opportunity to talk. Well, actually, to communicate with the person or the machine gamit yung telex. You remember, telex is a chat machine composed of, telex is a combination of a telegraph plus a telephone line plus a typewriter. So you type on the typewriter, lalabas doon sa paper ng telex machine na kausap mo, yung iyong tinatype. Sasagot yung kausap mo, magta-type din siya doon sa typewriter, and then makikita mo doon sa paper na lalabas doon sa iyong telex machine. The point is, you interview whoever is in the room. After you interview, you now make a guess. And then you guess, is this where the machine is? So you make a guess. Is this where the machine is or is this where the machine is? And if you make the correct guess, then you win the game. If you do not make the correct guess, in other words, you commit an error, then we say you lose the game, and then we say that the machine has been able to impress upon you that it is a person. Let me repeat, that's the point. We want the machine to impress upon you that it is not a machine, but it is a person that you are communicating using the telex machine. Yan. And anong sabi natin, if you remember? Kung ipa-plot natin on a graph, yung capability, ano yung i-graph natin? Yung capability of the machine, capability of the machine measured in terms of the error. Let me repeat that, capability of the machine in terms of the error, guessing where the machine is. Okay? So, yung error, when you make the guess, we will plot that according to your uh, y-axis. And then your x-axis will be your time. And ito yung sabi ni Alan Turing. In the 1950s, yung capability ng machine to impress upon you that it is not a machine but it is a person. Let me repeat that. Yung capability nung machine. Sorry time pala to, 1950s. Nung 1950s, yung capability ng machine to impress upon you that it is a person and not a machine, in others, to fool you to believe that it is a person, yung error involved ay practically zero, sabi ni Alan Turing. Practically zero or literally zero noong 1950s kasi madaling interviewin, magtanong ka lang ng difficult question, hindi na masagot. Pero sabi ni Alan Turing, tataas yung capability na yan. At some point in time, yung capability na yan magiging 50% in terms of the error. In other words, you make a guess and 50% of the time, you are wrong. In other words, 50% of the time, you believe that the machine is a person. Ergo, lalabas na ano? Ay, ano ba nangyari dito? Ergo, lalabas na yung sinasabi natin kanina. Ano yung sinasabi natin kanina? Lalabas na the machine is able to exhibit intelligent behavior such that it is indistinguishable from a human. Yan. Ay, hindi pala ako nakashare. Naloko na. Ulitin natin Kala ko nakashare ako Sorry. Naku, kulang sa practice. Share ulit tayo. Okay, let me repeat. Ang pinag-uusapan natin itong Turing's test. Turing's test meaning to say, originally, it's called the imitation game by Alan Turing. That what is the test all about? It is a test of machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to or indistinguishable from that of the human. And i-review lang natin to kasi ginawa nyo na ito Pinag-usapan na natin to. You pick out a room, one room, and then another room, and then you put a person in it and a machine in it. And then you make the guess using a telex machine, pinaliwanag ko na kanina. Using a telex machine, you interview whoever is in the room and find out where the person is and where the machine is. Now, sabi nga natin kanina, you can plot the capacity of the machine, or in terms of the error that you make when you make the guess, you can plot the capacity of the machine across time. And sabi ni Alan Turing, ngayong 1950s, pag in-interview mo yung machine, madaling malaman na machine yung kausap mo using a telex machine. Pag nakikipag-chat ka, magtanong ka lang ng difficult question, hindi na niya masasagot. Pag hindi niya na masagot, di sasabihin mo lang, okay, nandito sa room na ito yung machine and therefore sa kabila, nandun yung tao. Pero sabi ni Alan Turing, yung capacity ng machine and therefore the error that you make, tataas yan. At some point in time, the machine can actually fool you and make you believe that the machine is in fact a person. And in fact, binigay ko na sa inyo, meron na tayong such a kind of a machine. Ang pangalan, GPT-3. Yan. Ni-research na ba yan, GPT-3? Yeah. Kala ko nakashare na naman ng tinapay, sorry. Naubos na yung oras natin, nakakayamot. Repeat. 'To, sabi natin ano, pinag-uusapan natin Turing's test. Ano yung Turing's test? Originally called imitation game by Alan Turing in 1950, is a test of a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to, or better yet, indistinguishable from that of a human. And sabi natin, you play this game, imitation game, I've already explained that earlier, pero ulitin natin. You play this game, you come up with a room and another room, and you put in a person and a machine. And then you try to make a guess where the machine is and where the person is. Now, before you make the guess, you interview the person or the machine. As you interview the person or the machine, you use a telex machine. I already explained what it is. And then, you make the guess. And sabi nga natin, lumalabas na, sabi ni Alan Turing, by the 1950s, almost zero ang error that you make when you make the guess. Pero sabi ni Alan Turing, as time goes by, gagaling ang capability ng machine and therefore tataas ang iyong error. At some point in time, lalabas 50% error. Pag ganyan na nangyari, by definition, sabi ni Alan Turing, you have an artificially intelligent machine. Ergo, the establishment of artificial intelligence as a discipline. Bakit? Kasi if you remember, we have explained earlier, while it is never theoretically possible that a triangle will have more than 3 angles, that can never happen. That's impossible. Diba? Pinag-usapan natin yan. Now, because that's impossible, what does that mean? Well, you cannot have in theory, dali lang ha. In theory, you cannot have such a machine, even only in theory. But what we're saying is, when it comes to Turing's test, that you end up with 50% error, that is not impossible. And therefore, theoretically possible. Let me repeat, not impossible and therefore theoretically possible. And so sinasabi ni Alan Turing, in theory, at least in theory, we can have artificial intelligence. At dahil napatunayan ni Alan Turing, in theory, this can be done, ergo, you have the discipline of artificial intelligence beginning in his time, based on Turing's test. Kaya meron tayong discipline called artificial intelligence. Noong una, yung discipline na yan sa philosophy lang kasi puro daldalan lang ng daldalan. Pero later, nagkaroon ng engineering application and there you have it. By the time we know it, nauso na si GPT-3. Diba? Ito nga, ini-interview si GPT-3. Diba? Sabi natin, pwede niyong panoodin, di ba? So you try to see that on your own. Ano, bawal kasing ipalabas natin dito. So, what are we saying? Artificial intelligence is possible. Miss Castro, batukan mo nga ako pagka hindi ako nakaka-share. Ha?
Sige po.
Dapat pala, kanina pa nating sinama ka eh. Ngayon, ganito. Maliwanag, kahit paano, alam na natin, especially your generation, posible ang artificial intelligence. Meron ng ito nga, si GPT-3, pumapasa na nga sa Turing's test. Yan. Hindi lang natapos ang usapan dyan, ha? Ganare. Hindi natapos eh. Bakit? Kasi yung generation nila, maraming magkakabarkada yan eh. Saan na ba yun? Ay, nawala yung aking, nawala yung ating Jamboard. Okay. Ngayon, ano sabi natin, ha? So, yung generation na yan, napakahusay na generation eh. Isipin nyo ha, isa sa member ng generation nila, magkako-contemporary siya si Claude Shannon. Si Claude Shannon, yung umimbento ng, ng application ng tree tableau sa engineering. And therefore, made possible yung tawag natin ni circuit boards, which therefore made possible yung anong tawag natin? Computers. Yung tunay na nagpakita nung possibility ng computer, sino? Another member of that generation, alam nyo na, si Alan Turing. Si Alan Turing, panoodin yung sine niya, Turing's Imitation Game, napakaganda. Although nakakaiyak. Kasi doon na makikita kung paano naapi si Alan Turing. So, 1930s, nagsulat siya ng paper, partly inspired by Claude Shannon, paper on universal machine. Well, ito pa yung isa, si Gilbert Ryle. Napaka-importante ng contribution ni Gilbert Ryle although hindi pinapansin. 1940s, meron siyang sinulat na libro. Yan. Ano yung libro ni Gilbert Ryle? Ito, tingnan natin. Gilbert Ryle, The Concept of Mind.
Screen nyo.
Yan. Nakashare ba? Nakashare?
Sir,
Ito.
natatakpan lang po nung maligayang araw.
Ay, napaka-visit naman yung maligayang araw na yan, ha? Dali, tanggalin natin. Hide. Yan. Tanggalin na rin natin tong banner. Yan, o. Pagka may kasama ako, mas maganda yung usapan, eh. Ngayon, itong libro ni Gilbert Ryle na ito, pinablish kailan? 1949. 49. Pero siyempre, bago na-publish ang libro na yan, dinidiscuss na niya sa kanyang mga klase. Yan si Gilbert Ryle ay professor sa Oxford University. At siya ang editor ng one of the most important journals ng philosophy, Proceedings of Aristotelian Society at saka Mind. Now, napaka-importante ng ginawa niya. Ano yung ginawa niya? Doon sa kanyang libro, anong title ng libro niya? The Concept of Mind. Doon sa kanyang libro, The Concept of Mind, mayroon siyang sinasabi. Yun daw mind, the way we practice it, the way we use the term mind, brings with it contradictions. Brings with it contradictions. Yeah. Ano yung contradictions na bit-bit ng concept ng mind? Yan ang malaking problema. For a long time, hindi natin pinapansin. Ngayon, bakit importante ito? Kasi itong concept of mind ni Gilbert Ryle, kagaya nung panahon ni George Bull, anong ginawa ni George Bull? Ni-reinvent niya yung logic as a discipline. Well, in this case, we will reinvent the concept of mind. Yan. Miss Castro, pwede tayong mag-reinvent ng concepts. Bakit? Because concepts are tools. Kung yung sapatos mo ay hindi magandang pang scuba diving, i-reinvent mo such that magiging pang scuba diving yung sapatos mo. Walang masama doon. Same with the concept of mind, why not? If it brings you problems, you have to reinvent it. Yun ang ginawa ni George Boole, if you remember, sa logic. Yung Aristotelian logic, ni-reinvent niya to become mathematical logic, di ba? Ginawa natin yan eh. Yan. So, naging mathematical logic para sa atin, ano? Para sa Lasal Ateneo, UST, mga medieval-minded yung mga yun eh. Hindi pa modern. So, ganito. Okay? We have what we might call our traditional concept of mind. Yan. Now, yung ating traditional concept of mind, ano ang problema natin dyan? Okay. Let me illustrate. Illustrate natin, ha? Paano natin i-illustrate? Ganare. Yung traditional concept of mind, madali illustrate eh. Supposing you have a person. Okay. You have a person. Okay, person. And then you have a parrot. You know, you have a pet parrot. Sandali ha, mahirap mag-drawing ng parrot. Nak ng tinapay. So, you have a pet parrot at home. And every once in a while, you talk to it. And it responds. And then you have a machine. Okay, supposing you have a machine, of course, you know the machine that we are very fond of. It's called the computer. Okay, so given your machine, now we have a question. Okay, supposing we ask them to recite a phrase. Recite. When we ask them to recite something that, we will ask them to recite something that we are familiar with. Okay? Halimbawa, recite mo the question, kumain ka na? Yan. Okay? So, step number 1, human recites, kumain ka na. Check. Step number 2, parrot recites, kumain ka na. Step number 3, computer recites, kumain ka na. Question. Okay. Balik tayo kay Miss Castro. Nalulungkot na ako eh. Miss Castro, pwede ba kitang tanungin? Sandali ha. Miss Castro, are ang tanong. Tatanungin kita. Nandiyan ka pa ba, Miss Castro?
Yes po.
O, are ang tanong ha. When they recite, and they can recite even in unison. When they recite, are they reciting in the same way? Meaning to say there's no difference between a human and a parrot reciting, between a human and a machine reciting. Is there no difference?
Sir, siguro po yung machine wala po siyang emotion pag magre-recite.
Yung parrot, may emotion.
Siguro po magagaya niya yung parang tone nung tao.
Magagaya.
Opo.
Yan. Oh, that's the usual reaction of everyone. Ito ngayon yung sinasabi ko. Balik tayo sa screen natin. Ito ngayon ang sinasabi ko. Traditionally, ulitin natin ha, traditionally, we say only humans actually recite or say something. Parrots, parrot. Machines, parrot only. Like parrots. Yan. Yan ang sinasabi natin, ano? Sabi nga ni Miss Castro, eh yung machine naman ay walang emotions eh. So yung machine cannot ask questions properly. Eh, yung parrots, they only parrot. Tama? Tanungin ko nga ulit. Tama ba, Miss Castro? Parrots only parrot. Tama, mali.
Tama.
Machines can only parrot like parrots. Tama baga?
Tama po.
Oh, ayan. Ay, ganito nga. From a philosopher's point of view, ibang usapan eh. Pag tinanong niyo ang pilosopo, gaya ni Gilber, Ryle, humans, parrots, and machines can recite equally well. Yun ang sinasabi ng mga pilosopo eh. Bakit? O, una ganito ha. Okay, tatanungin ko kayo. Okay, let's take a human. Okay, human. Okay, may human din eh, excuse me. Okay. Now, humans have minds. Miss Castro, tama ka. Humans have minds. Check.
Opo.
Humans have bodies. Tama, Miss Castro?
Opo.
Yan. Okay, punta tayo kay Rene Descartes. Ito si Rene Descartes, pahamak eh. What's his name? Rene? You've come across him already. Si Rene Descartes. Si Rene Descartes ay kaibigan ni, kailan nabuhay ito? 1600s. He's one of the founders of modern thought. Okay. Si Rene Descartes ay kaibigan ni Galileo na mahilig sa science, mahilig sa geometry, mahilig sa mathematics, focus on geometry. Si Rene Descartes mahilig sa geometry. Siya nga umimbento ng Cartesian coordinate system trying to reconcile, let me repeat, trying to reconcile geometry and algebra. Noong time niya, there was no way of reconciling studies in geometry and algebra. Sabi ni Rene Descartes, simple lang yan, invento tayo ng Cartesian coordinate system, tapos ang boxing. Ngayon, si Rene Descartes mahilig mag-reconcile ng maraming bagay. Bakit? Pilosopo. And sabi nga natin, magmula nung panahon ni Pythagoras, ang mga pilosopo ay addict sa coherence. Addict sa coherence. Remember, addict sa harmony. Ano nangyari? Si Descartes may kaibigan si Galileo. Si Galileo inapi ng simbahan kasi sabi ni Galileo, the earth is not the center of the universe. Tama, sabi ni Galileo, tama si Copernicus. Si Copernicus, sabi niya, although namatay na siya nung nalaman natin, sabi ni Copernicus in a book published after his death that if we look at the movement of the planets, they cannot be said to be revolving around the Earth. They seem to be revolving around the sun. Using the work of Copernicus, sabi ni Galileo, titingnan ko nga ang situation. And nakita niya ang Venus, merong phases, parang buwan. Merong quarter moon, may half moon, may second quarter moon, merong, in other words, second quarter Venus, first quarter Venus. Turns out, sabi ni Galileo, mukhang yung nakikita natin sa Venus dahil may shadow ang Earth na pumapatong dun sa Venus. Nag-i-intervene ang Earth between the Sun and Venus. And if we plot how we see Venus using his telescope, sabi niya, we can only conclude Venus is revolving around the Sun and not around the Earth. dinagdag pa ni Galileo, pag tiningnan nyo ang Jupiter, ang daming buwan at ang mga buwan ng Jupiter ay umiikot hindi sa Earth, umiikot sa buwan. Umiikot sa Jupiter. Sabi niya, eto ay dalawang patunay na hindi totoong the Earth is the center of the universe. Nagalit ang simbahan. Sabi ng simbahan, putang ina mo, sira ulo mo. Only man is created in the image of God. Therefore, his home is the most important home in the universe. Therefore, it must be the center of the universe. And you, Mr. Galileo, are guilty of blasphemy. Miss Castro, sira ulo, ano? So, ikinulong well, actually, susunugin si Galileo, Miss Castro. Ang nangyari lamang, kaya hindi sinunog si Galileo, may estudyante si Galileo na mga sikat at that time, and sabi nila, ay maawa naman kayo sa mama, kabait nung mama napakatalino, wag niyo na sunugin. Ay salamat doon sa estudyante, ay imbis na sinunog si Galileo, kagaya ni isang barkada ni Galileo, sinunog. Dahil sabi niya, tama si Copernicus, alam niyo nangyari sa barkada niya, sinunog, alive. Ang pangalan si Giovanni Bruno. Si Galileo was about to be burned like Giovanni Bruno, pero hindi na. Salamat sa estudyante, pinagtanggol, and therefore, life imprisonment na lang. Palagay ko, pag ako pinili, sasabihin ko, patayin niyo na lang ako kaysa life imprisonment. Miss Castro, pag ako susunugin na, pagtatanggol mo rin ako, ha? Ngayon, ano nangyari, Miss Castro? Ganito. Sabi ni Rene Descartes, ay ako estudyante ako ng mga Jesuits. Parang ako, estudyante ako ng Jesuits, kaya ako ganito magdamit at maggupit eh. Ay estudyante ng mga Jesuits from the time na bata hanggang tumanda, parang ako nga. Ay sabi ni Rene Descartes, ay hindi ko naman pwedeng talikuran ng simbahan. Pero Miss Castro, ako tinalikuran ko simbahan. Salamat sa UP. Ganare. Ay sabi ni Rene Descartes, hindi ko kayang talikuran ng simbahan. Ay pero on the other hand, ay hindi ko rin kayang talikuran ng science. Ay from the point of view of science, ay walang mali sa ginagawa ni Galileo. From the point of view of my religion, ay hindi ko pwedeng kalabanin ng simbahan. So question mark, how do I reconcile science and religion? Yun ang problema. Ay addict nga sa coherence gawa ng philosophy. So, eto ngayon tayo, no? Trying to reconcile science and religion, sabi ni Rene Descartes, magawa tayo ng parang similar doon sa Euclidean geometry na may axioms, and out of these axioms, we derive all the rules and principles known to mankind, and then we unify all knowledge of mankind into a single system. And then using that system, we can now reconcile science and religion. So yung science, ma-reconcile sa religion. Yun ang problema ni Rene Descartes. Now, paiksiin na lang natin ang kwento. Eto ngayon. Reconciling many things, merong problema si Descartes. How do you reconcile the mind of a person with his body? One of the discussions ni Rene Descartes has something to do with reconciling the mind and the body. Yan. Okay. Now, what is the mind? What is the body? We both have a mind and a body. Now, notice, guguluhin kita, Miss Castro, ha? Pakisagot. Tama, mali. Humans have bodies and minds. Yes?
Tama po.
Next question. Bodies affect minds. Example, kunyari ako tumakbo ng marathon. Hindi pala, kunyari ikaw, Miss Castro, tumakbo ng marathon. At the end of the day, tuwan-tuwa ka. So, natapos mo yung marathon, 42 kilometers, you're so happy, nag-party. Tapos, party up to the wee hours of the morning, all of a sudden, na-realize mo, ay puta na, may examen pala kami kay Professor De Villa sa mathematical logic, naloko na. So, nag-aral ka mabuti, bakit hindi take home exam? Nag-aral ka mabuti, pag-aaral mo, nag-cramming ka, nakalimutan mong kumain ng breakfast and then you take the exam. Miss Castro, tanong lang, tama, mali? Dahil pagod na pagod ka, mahihirapan ka sa examen, tama ka?
Tama po.
Hoy, nag-marathon ka, nag-party ka pa, nag-cramming ka pa, hindi ka pa kumain ng breakfast. Pagkuha mo ng examen, mahina ang iyong isipan. Tama, Miss Castro?
Tama po.
Okay, so bodies affect minds. Okay. Next question, do minds affect bodies? Miss Castro, do minds affect bodies?
Yes po.
Bigyan kita example. Every once in a while, dyan sa academic oval ng UP, ako yung nagja-jogging. Pag minsan, yung jogging ko ay in preparation for a marathon. Ay di jogging ako. Ay sabi ko, halimbawa, bago ako mag-marathon, subukan ko kaya ang 26 kilometers na run non-stop. Ay di takbo ako. Naka-10 ikot na ako. Sabihin na lang natin na naka 15 kilometers na ako. Sabi ko, putang ina, ba't ko baga ginagawa itong lintik na ito? Nakakapagod. Yan. Pero nandun ako sa dulo ng oval, academic oval, sa malayo, nakita ko, nakaupo dun sa AS steps yung aking crush na crush. May crush ako. Kunyari lang, baka magalit asawa ko eh. Kunyari, may crush ako. Ay ano mangyayari, Miss Castro? Ay di ako'y pagod na pagod, pero pagdating ko doon sa harap ng Palma Hall, doon sa AS steps, nandun yung aking crush, biglang lalakas ang katawan ko, tapos may bounce pa aking takbo. Pwedeng mangyari o hindi, Miss Castro? Pwede
Pwede po.
Oo, gawa ng ako ay inspired. So, just the thought in my mind na pwede akong makita ng crush ko at dahil nang nakita ko ng crush ko ay machong-macho ako nagtumatakbo, ay baka magka-crush pa sa akin. That thought in my mind will inspire me and therefore affect my body and I produce more endorphins and more hormones that enable me to run better. Tama ga? Miss Castro, pwede
Pwede po.
Yan. Ngayon, gana rin ngayon ang situation. Ang sabi natin, the mind affects the body. Pero sabi rin natin, the body affects the mind. Yan. May problema, Miss Castro. Bakit? The mind at body are in different places. The body is in what we call space-time. Space. Space, hindi spice. Space-time. Yan. Miss Castro, pakisagot lang ako ha. Maraming salamat. Daming utang sa ng mga kaklase mo. The body has length, width, and height. Can be measured in terms of length, width, and height. Tama ga? Width, length, height. Tama. The body has length, width, and height and it exists in time. Tama?
Tama po.
Yan. Question, Miss Castro. Is the mind in space-time? In other words, is the mind something that has length, width, and height?
Wala po.
Sigurado ka ha? Length, width, and height? Yung mind meron? Malaking katanungan. Yan. Ngayon, ito ngayon ang ating contradiction. Miss Castro, ano yung contradiction natin? The mind affects the body affects the mind, but they're not in the same place. The body is in space-time, but the mind is not. So how can something which is in space-time affect something which is not in the same place? Anong sagot mo, Miss Castro?
Sir, di ko po alam.
Ay, ang labo eh. Sabi ni Rene Descartes, putang ina, paano ga ito? Miss Castro, di hindi nga malaman kung anong sagot, ay lumuhod si Rene Descartes. Alam mo kung bakit? Sabi ni Rene Descartes, hallelujah! It's a mystery to be embraced with faith. So, literally, sabi ni Rene Descartes, how does the mind affect the body? It is a mystery that only God knows. And for him, it is a miracle of God, a proof that there is a God, that something which is in space can affect something which is not in space and vice versa. And so sabi ni Rene Descartes, this is a mystery to be embraced with faith, to be included in the mysteries of the church. I'm not kidding ha, diyan ko nakuha yung expression na yan, to be embraced with faith. Ngayon, kayo ang tatanungin ko, palagay ninyo, everybody else, Miss Blas, papaano ka nga nag-relate sa isa't isa? Pakisagot nga. Paano niyo sasagutin yan? Dagdagan pa natin. By the way, that kind of problem is called the mind-body problem. What is that called? It's called the mind-body problem. At sinong nagpakita ng mind-body problem? Si Rene Descartes. Now, that's one contradiction that everybody should know, sabi ni Gilber, Ryle, ano? Now, there's another contradiction. Okay. What's the other contradiction? When you commit an action, pwede nating sukatin, ano? Sasabihin natin, yung action na yan ay can be of two things. Either siya ay rational or irrational. Tama ba, Ms. Castro? An action can be rational or irrational. Yan. Okay. Paliwanag natin. No? Hindi na ako sinasagot ni Ms. Castro. Sige na nga. Tinakwil mo na ako, ha? Imagine, ako, may asawa. So, eto yung asawa ko, labi-dabi kami. And then I call my wife. I call my wife from the office. Tawag ako sa opisina. Honey bunch, hindi ako makakauwi ng maaga ngayon, so umuna ka na mag-dinner. Bakit? Na-promote ako. And everybody in the office is celebrating and they're giving me a party for my promotion. So, hindi ako makauwi ha, ng maaga, okay lang. Sabi naman ng aking asawa, honey bunch, yes, popsicle toast, you can enjoy your party. Bahala ka na, total tomorrow naman ay weekend, so masaya. Yan. Okay. Tingnan nga natin mga sagot ninyo. Ay, wala. So, ganito. Here I am. I come home, wee hours of the morning, and lasing, I slump into bed. Tapos, ito yung wife ko. Sabi niya, kawawa naman ang aking popsicle toast. So, sabi nung aking honey bunch, sige, ipagluluto kita ng breakfast in bed para pagising mo, hindi ka na pupunta sa sala, diyan ka na lang sa bed, and then you will enjoy your breakfast and you sleep again. So, ito ngayon yung aking wife, nagluto ng breakfast in the morning, weekend, dala-dala sa tray, sabi niya, okay, katok sa pinto, popsicle toast, gising ka na ba? Binuksan ng bintana, kakanta-kanta pa siya, the birds and the bees, nadidinig mo, and then sunshine coming in, and then ginigising mo. Popsicle toast, breakfast in bed, eto na. Kaso may problema. Habang hawak-hawak mo yung tray, may pumasok na bee. Pagpasok ng B, na-sting ka nung B. Nabuhos mo yung breakfast in bed sa mukha nung asawa mo. Okay, hindi yan yung joke, Miss Castro. But anyway, so nabuhos mo. Ngayon, Miss Castro, ito yung nangyari. Yung sting nung B, irrational. Kasi yung sting ng B is just a matter of cause and effect relationship. Hindi ka nag-isip. Ang nangyari lang, na-sting ka nung B. And therefore irrational. Walang pag-iisip na ginawa. It's just like a billiard ball, tumama sa isang billiard ball and then pumunta ng direksyon ng isang billiard ball sa direksyon. Kunyari may isang billiard ball, tumama doon sa isang billiard ball. Sabihin natin na number 8, yan. Tumama sa isa pang billiard ball, kunyari din tinamaan din sa medyo ilalim. So ito, tatakbo ng pagganon dahil yung resultant doon ang punta. So, cause and effect relationship lang ang meron yung billiard ball, the same with the sting of the bee. Yan. Miss Castro, agree, disagree?
Agree po.
O, irrational, ano? Ngayon, ngayon ang situation. Yung B, share ulit tayo ng screen, irrational ang epekto. Pero may ibang sitwasyon. Ano yung ibang sitwasyon? Something rational. So, ito ngayon ang pangyayari. Katok sa pinto yung aking asawa, may honey bunch, tapos kakanta-kanta, wake up, little rosebud, wake up! Popsicle toast, ito na yung iyong breakfast, binuksan ng bintana, bees and flower and the bees are around, the birds and the bees, and then sunshine coming in. Tapos, nung malapit na naamoy, mabango. Inamoy yung asawa, ang bango-bango. Tapos nalaman mo, wait. Anong amoy iyon? Ano bang mga favorite niyong amoy? Well, kung ano man, amoy French vanilla. Oh my God, hindi ako nagpe-French vanilla, sabi ng asawa. Pagkatapos tinignan, may pockmark sa leg. Oh my God! Pagkatapos tinignan yung polo, oh my God, may lipstick. Pagkatapos may binuksan yung coat at may nakitang panyo. Oh my God, this is not mine. Premise 1, premise 2, premise 3. Conclusion! Binuhusan ng kumukulong kape. Yung asawa, sinama na yung buong breakfast. Yan. Miss Castro, yan ang nangyari. Ngayon, ano situation? Ito yung situation. Yung pangyayaring yan, ang tawag natin, rational. Bakit? Ay pinag-isipan merong mental process na nangyari. Tama ka? Premise 1, premise 2, premise 3. Conclusion po, tayo na, may kabit ang aking asawa. Ay, naloko na. Yan. Ngayon, nandito yung joke. You have an action. Pag ang action mo ay may corresponding mental process, or sabihin na lang natin corresponding thinking. Yan, sabihin na lang natin thinking. Then sasabihin natin your action is rational. Miss Castro, pakisagot nga. Tama ga ako? Pag ang action ay may corresponding mental process, may thinking involved, rational siya. Tama?
Tama po.
Yan. Ngayon, remember, action as a term comes from the word act. Now remember, act is a verb. Tama? Act is a verb. And verb means action word. Tama? Now, act is a verb. It is an action word. Excuse me. Okay. Now, thinking, which involves your mental process, comes from the word think. And think is a verb. Tama o mali, Miss Castro?
Tama po.
So, think is a verb. So, what we're saying is you have an action that is rational because there is thinking involved. Now, this now complicates the problem. Why? Because if thinking is itself irrational, why can we say that? Because remember, thinking can either be rational or irrational because it is an action. Let me repeat. Because thinking is an action, therefore, it can be either, because action siya eh, rational or irrational. Tama, Gamis Castro? Tama,
Opo.
no? Now, if action itself of thinking is irrational, then the original action will be irrational. Tama?
Opo.
Pag yung action of thinking itself is irrational, then the action we're dealing with becomes irrational itself. So we must now be able to say that this action is in fact rational. Now, how will it become rational? That means it will be an action, lagyan natin 2, that involves thinking. So, pangalawang level na yon. But, Miss Castro, yung thinking na level 2 can itself be irrational or rational. Tama ga? So, for it to become rational, this must involve thinking plus another thinking. Walang katapusan. Yan. Tama ga, Miss Castro? Ito yung
Opo.
original action, whatever it is. Okay, ito yung original action. Yung original action, may corresponding thinking. Pero yung thinking itself, ay is an action. So, for it to be a rational action, there must be thinking itself, conjoined with this action. But then, thinking itself, on another level, will involve another thinking, and another thinking ay walang katapusan. Susundan. So what we have here is a paradox. What we have here is a paradox, a kind of contradiction. Let's call it Gilbert-Ryle's paradox.
Share screen.
Ha? Ay, hindi ako naka-share. Ay. Okay, salamat, Miss Castro. Ulitin natin, ha?
Hindi po.
Yan, naka-share na ngayon. Remember, ang sabi natin, when you have an action, that will involve thinking. But thinking itself will have to involve thinking on another level. Sabi nga natin kanina. Because it can either be rational or irrational. For it to be rational, therefore it must involve another level of thinking. But then that will mean another level of thinking and so on and so forth. So ulitin natin, ito ang nangyayari. You have your original action, and dinagdagan natin ng thinking. Okay. But sabi natin, this thinking itself is an action. And because it is also an action, then that means there must be a thinking involved for it to become rational. But then thinking itself here on this level is also an action. So for it to become rational, there must be some thinking involved. But then this thinking itself is also an action. So for this thinking to be itself rational, there must be, and this goes on ad infinitum. And the moment your thinking becomes irrational, then this becomes irrational, then this becomes irrational, then this becomes irrational, therefore this becomes irrational. Yan. Nasusundan, Miss Castro?
Opo.
Tawagin natin yung Gilbert-Ryle's paradox. Yan. Gilbert-Ryle's paradox. Excuse me. Yung libro ni Gilbert Ryle, ang ginagawa niya, makapal eh. Mga ganito kakapal yun eh. Bawat chapter, yung unang chapter, pinaliwanag niya yung traditional concept of mind and the mind-body problem. Pero, after chapter 1, na pinaliwanag niya yung traditional concept of mind at saka yung mind-body problem, sinundan pa niya ng maraming chapter at sinasabi niya, putang na, ito yung marami pang dahilan eh. Ang daming, hindi lang isa, sabi niya, ang daming contradictions. Isa na nga yung Gilbert-Ryle's paradox. So sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, if a concept brings with it contradictions, we need to reinvent it. Yan ang tanong. Paano mo i-reinvent yung concept? Okay? So what's the problem? This is very simple. The problem is the traditional concept of mind brings with it, ulit natin, the traditional concept of mind, sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, brings with it contradictions. And the entire book is all about the contradictions that this concept of mind brings with it. Ergo, this only means we need to reinvent the concept of mind. Now, how will you reinvent it? And ito yung clue. What's the clue? You have to find out the root of the error. Okay? In other words, may mga contradictions eh. Bakit nagkakaroon ng contradictions? Anong dahilan? Saan nagmumula yung mga contradictions na yan? Yun ang hinahanap ni Gilbert Ryle. At ang contradictions na yan, sabi niya, ay nanggagaling dito sa, okay, ito inimbento niya yung term. Ang tawag natin ay, mga ba yun? Sandali ha. Okay, what is it in the first place? It is a contradiction. of some kind. Now, ang ginagawa natin, sabi niya, meron tayong kino-commit na category mistake. We are committing some kind of category mistake. That's the expression ni Gilbert, Ryle, ano? What is it that you do when you make a category mistake? Nagkamali ako kanina, ano? Let me just explain. Ang hinahanap natin yung root of the contradictions. Yan ang hinahanap natin, ano? Finding out the root of the contradictions, merong nakita si Gilbert, Ryle, ang tawag niya dyan, category mistake. Yan. Okay? Now, what do you do when you commit a category mistake? What is it all about? Yan. Okay? Now, ito ang paliwanag. I have to illustrate. Okay, how do we illustrate? Sandali ha. In English term, by the way, this is called reification. In plain English terms, this is called reification. Pero binigyan lang ni Gilbert Ryle ng magandang description, category mistake. Okay. What do you do when you commit reification or category mistake? Ganito. Imagine niyo si Professor De Villa may kaibigang kasi malimit ako sa Sierra Madre sa likod ng Angat Dam eh. Magubat doon. Sa Matulid at saka sa kung ano ilog doon. Sabihin na lang natin may kaibigan akong dumagat. At yan dumagat na yan has never set foot on any city or any town. Yan. Sinama ko sa UP. Sabi ko, presidente, kasi sa kanila ang head ng mga tribo, ang tawag nila presidente. Okay, Presidente Baro. Yan, Baro, B-A-R-O. Presidente Baro, sasama kita. Punta tayo ng UP. Ngayon, pagdating sa UP, tinuro ko, ay, are, ang aming University Avenue. Yan. Are, si Malakas at si Maganda doon sa gate. Yan. O are, ang aming mga security guard. Naku, napaka-beast ng mga yan. Ang hirap kausapin pagka ikaw gusto mo mag-jogging ngayong panahon ng COVID. Yan. Sabi, tapos are, ang mga polis namin. Naku, yung mga yan, iba niya ni kurakot. O are, ang noon yun na, hindi na ngayon. Mga polis natin yan, matitino na eh. Are, ang aming mga profesor, nako, may mga profesor dyan, mga bastos. Parang ako. Yan, are, aming mga estudyante, nako, yung mga estudyante namin, marami dyan, bastos, mas bastos pa kayo sa mga profesor. And so on and so forth. So, inikot ko, pinakita ko yan ng Palma Hall, yan ang aming College of Business Administration, School of Economics. Yan. Ngayon, dumating ang hapon. Pagdating nung hapon, Miss Castro, itong sabi sa akin, ay kuya, ay ako'y pagod na eh, puta na eh. Ituro mo naman sa akin yung university. Nye. Ulitin natin, sabi nung dumagat, ay pagod na ako, ay puta na eh, pangako mo sa akin, ituturo mo yung university, ituro mo na sa akin na makauwi na tayo. Kamot ako ng ulo, paano? Bakit? Kasi, ang akala noong dumagat ay yung university ay parang Palma Hall or parang UP student or parang professor na ituturo mo. Ay papaliwanag ko, gusto ko sabihin ng university ay yan ang lahat na yan. Ang tawag diyan category mistake. Bakit? Iba ang category ng isang concept that is abstract, like a concept of a university, or the concept of the value of the pie, or the concept of numbers, compared sa material objects like human bodies and buildings and avenues and so on and so forth, may problema. Pinaghalo noong dumagat yung dalawang categories, dalawang concepts. Remember, when you have a conceptual framework, this is a system. And when you have a system, you have rules. And when you have rules, given your rules, some things belong together and some things do not belong together. Napaghalo. Now, pagka ang rules nyo ay nabe-break, merong ludicrous situations na magre-resulta. Halimbawa, when I point to my table and I tell you, oh, meet my table, it is a very honest table. Or sabihin mo, my love for you is 4 by 6 by 7. Taloko na. Because yung concept ng 4 by 6 by 7 is a description applicable to material objects, where on the other hand, very conceptual, in other words, very abstract, yung concept of love. Or yung table, which is a material object, ay when you ascribe to it honesty, medyo may problema because honesty is something that is ascribed to personalities, which is, of course, a personality is an abstract entity, not a piece of object. That's what happens when you have category mistake. Now, anong ibig sabihin ng reification? Tingnan natin, meaning of reification. To consider, ito yung ibig sabihin ng reification eh. To consider or represent something abstract as a material or a concrete thing. That is what category mistake is all about. To consider or represent something abstract as a material or concrete thing, or to give definite content or form to a concept or idea. Yan. That's what happens when you are guilty of reification. That's what happens when you commit category mistake. Now, given the category mistake, nagkakaroon tuloy tayo ng confusion. Now, the concept of mind, we should not reify. We cannot reify. Now, if you do not want to reify, what do you do? If you do not want to commit category mistake, what do you do? If you do not want to commit category mistake, what can you do? Yan ang problema. So, ito yung sagot. We must consider mind not as a material object, but as a capacity. Wow, makinig na mabuti. Importante ito. A capacity. Or a potential. Or a disposition. So, ayan ang sagot ni Gilbert Ryle. Okay, let me explain this way. According to Gilbert Ryle, to say that someone has a mind in the traditional sense is to say that someone has a magical spirit in a machine. Which is of course your body. Yan ang sabi ni Gilbert Ryle. That's how we practice the traditional concept of mind. Sabi niya, that's what we do. And given that, Sabi niya, ayaw ko niyan. Sabi ni Gilbert, ayaw ko niyan. So if you have to replace the concept of mind without being guilty of reification, this is what you do. To say that someone has a mind is to say that someone has some capacity to one, take in inputs, to process these inputs and generate corresponding output. Yan. Tatlong bagay. One, take in inputs. Two, process these inputs. Three, generate outputs. That's your capacity. Now, what's the input? Okay, let's get back to our comparison. What's the input? Okay, eto, may input. Somebody enters the room. And what's the room? What's the room? It is a store. Tindahan. Merong room. Merong door. Pumasok sa room. Yung isang tao. Merong sensor. Merong parrot sa loob. Nung pumasok yung tao sa loob, anong sabi nung parrot? Kumain ka na? Kumain ka na? So anong nangyari? Merong natanggap na input yung parrot. May nakita siya. May nadinig siya. Dahil sa nakita niya at nadinig niya, given the inputs, pinrocess nung parrot yung input. Pagka-process nung parrot yung input, ang conclusion, sabi nung parrot, oh, di tatanungin ko siya, kumain ka na? Kumain ka na? Meron siyang capacity to take in inputs, process input, generate output. May pumasok na tao, may sensor. Based on the sensor, nakita ang image processing sensor, pumasok doon sa computer, galing doon sa camera. Pagpasok sa computer, pinrocess ng computer, after processing, sabi ng computer, may taong dumating, ito yung taong dumating, facial recognition, sabi niya, kumain ka na, kumain ka na. Yan. Ikaw naman, may input, nakita mo rin nadinig mo rin. And facial recognition, nakita mo yung tao, kakilala mo. Sino yan? Kapatid mo. Tinanong mo yung kapatid mo, kumain ka na, kumain ka na. Exactly doing the same thing. So, what are we saying? Yung sinasabi ni Gilbert, Ryle, they all recite equally because they all have minds. All of them have minds. A parrot has a mind. A machine has a mind. A human has a mind. That is what you call a dispositional concept of mind. Yung traditional concept of mind, guilty of category mistake. So, remember, I said disposition. Alright? So, this is the name, sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, of this reinvention of the concept of mind. The traditional, we will set aside. We will replace it with the dispositional concept of mind. That is what we will call it. What is it called? Dispositional concept of mind. Now, with the dispositional concept of mind, you do not have to invent some magical spirit in a machine. Some magical ghost in a machine. This is the term na ginamit ni Gilbert Ryle, ghost. We do not need to invent a ghost. All we need to do is understand what's going on. There is no need for inventing a ghost in a machine. And this is now what we do. We replace it. Yan, with that dispositional concept of mind. Ngayon, near-death experience. Nasagasaan ka ng isang kotse pero buhay ka pa, dinala ka sa ospital, nagkaroon ka ng near-death experience. Bakit? Kasi nakita mo kung ano nangyayari and then na-comatose ka. After na-comatose ka, gumising ka. Paggising mo, sabi mo dun sa iyong kausap, ay bakit nag-aaway yung doktor at saka yung nurse habang ako'y inooperahan? Yung kausap mo nagtaka. Sabi niya, under comatose ka paano mo nalaman? And then pinag-isipan mo ngayon, nagkaroon ako ng near-death experience. Nakikita ko yung doktor, inaaway niya yung nurse doon sa operating room kung saan ako'y nakahiga. At yung operating room ay ang kulay niya ay kulay pink. Bakit operating room yan ng pediatrics section ng ospital? Kasi hindi ako pwede doon sa isang operating room, kaya doon ako dinala sa operating room ng mga bata. Nagkaroon ka ng near-death experience, sabi mo merong out-of-body experience ka, sabi mo meron kang soul. Well, ipapaliwanag ko sa inyo. Ganare, Miss Castro, pagka kayo ay buhay, meron kang program paano ka maglakad, may program ka para magsalita, may program ka paano mag-triangulate, may program ka, napakaraming programs mo, kagaya ng mga arguments ninyo, napakaraming programs ninyong tumatakbo. Pag ikaw ay under comatose, pwedeng yung ilang programs na yan hindi gumagana. Pwedeng yung ilang programs na yan hindi gumagana. Pero hindi ibig sabihin patay ka. Bakit? May ibang programs na gumagana. Ngayon, Miss Castro, yung ibang programs mo na gumagana, kahit na ikaw ay mukhang tulog, may naamoy ka, may nararamdaman ka, may nadidinig ka, etc. Now, given the inputs, yung inputs mo incomplete. You have incomplete inputs. Pero yung incomplete inputs mo, ulitin natin na meron kang incomplete inputs. Yung incomplete inputs mo, pinagsama-sama mo. You now begin to read between the lines. Remember, logic. Read between the lines, connect the dots, bridge the gap. And having read between the lines, you now create a narrative. Because you are an addict to coherence. You're an addict of coherence. You cannot just see all these inputs without making them cohere. And sa kagustuhan mo magkaroon ng coherence doon sa mga inputs mo, umibend ka ng narrative according to your past and prior experience. What's your past and prior experience? Religion. Religious na tao ka. Dahil religious na tao ka, yung inputs mo, ginawan mo ng narrative, pinag-connect-connecta mo dahil addict ka nga sa coherence, ang naging invento mo, meron kang soul. Pero from another point of view, an alternative way of looking at it, Ms. Castro, you are a person who is programmed by your genetic inheritance. Tama mali, Ms. Castro? Ito yung huli, ipapakita ko sa inyo kung bakit ko sinasabing kayo program. Meron tayong linya. Sinama mo ng linya, pareho lang silang haba. Pero anong ginawa mo? Nilagyan mo nito. Nung nilagyan mo ngayon, anong nangyari? Nagmukha aring mahaba, are maiksi. Bakit? Kasi you're programmed to triangulate. But in fact, pag tiningnan nyo originally, magkasing haba lang sila. Pero dahil you're programmed like a machine to process inputs, you now seem to think na ito ay mas mahaba dito, pero hindi naman. That's another example of telling you you're a machine. And what I'm saying is, it does not follow that you have your near-death experience, you have a soul. Meron ako soul, 2, dini sa aking paa. Yan, Miss Castro. Nasusundan, Miss Castro?
Opo.
Yan, oh. Kaya pag-uwi ninyo ha, magkumpisal kayo, sabihin niyo nakinig kayo sa akin ngayon, hindi na kayo naniniwala na may soul kayo. Maligayang araw po, naubusan na tayo ng oras, overtime na tayo ng 1 minute. Itutuloy natin ang usapan, Miss Castro, sa susunod. Samahan mo uli ako, Miss Castro, ha? Next time. Maraming salamat po, ingat lagi, ha? Kumpisal kayo. Bless me, Father, for I've seen. Nakinig ako kay Prof. Divilla. Bye-bye, ingat lagi.
Thank you po.